Hercule Poirot chronicles the Chronometer's final epoch. Chapter 1. The Inciting Incident. The grand ballroom of the Ashcombe estate glittered with 1,000 points of light, crystal chandeliers suspended above the assembled guests like stars trapped in glass. It was a night befitting a gathering of the higher society, the creme de la creme of London's elite, all drawn by the promise of an exquisite evening, and, perhaps, a glimpse of the fabled chronometer that was said to possess peculiar powers. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, the matriarch of the house, had long treasured the chronometer, a peculiar antique watch, handed down through generations. Rumoured to keep time not just of the day but somehow of fate itself, the clock had become the centrepiece of her collection, and the source of whispered legends. Tonight, as the estate's clock chimed the 9th hour, the grand unveiling was set to begin. Among the guests stood a carefully curated circle: Sir Reginald Claremont, the dashing financier with a reputation for ruthlessness; Miss Eloise Hertford, an enigmatic heiress with secrets behind her sapphire eyes; Professor Archibald Langley, the reclusive historian whose knowledge was as vast as his social awkwardness; Mr. Charles Fenwick, a charming playwright known as much for his scandals as for his plays; and Dr. Helena Vaughan, the esteemed psychiatrist whose insights into the human mind were unmatched. The air was thick with anticipation and an undercurrent of tension that only the most astute observer could detect. Glances were exchanged, smiles measured, and beneath the veneer of politeness lay the subtle currents of envy, jealousy, and secrets yearning to be uncovered. The grand doors opened, and with a flourish, Lady Beatrice stepped forward, her voice commanding the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we witness a moment long awaited, the reveal of the Ashcombe chronometer, a relic that, legend says, marks the final epoch of any who dare to possess it." As she gestured to a velvet-draped pedestal, a hush fell. With a slow, deliberate motion, she pulled the velvet away, revealing the chronometer's intricate face, its golden hands gleaming under the soft light. But as the guests leaned in, an unexpected and chilling sound pierced the elegance. A sharp, echoing crash from the adjoining gallery. Conversations halted abruptly, replaced by a palpable wave of shock. The chronometer, it seemed, was gone. A scream rang out. Miss Eloise, pale and trembling, pointed towards the empty pedestal. It's vanished." The guests rushed toward the gallery where the noise had come from. There, sprawled across the marble floor, lay the lifeless body of Thomas Blythe, Lady Beatrice's trusted curator and the sole keeper of the chronometer's secrets. His eyes were wide open in eternal surprise, and a deep wound marked his temple. Chaos erupted. Lady Beatrice clutched her pearls, her face a mask of disbelief. "Thomas! No! This cannot be!" The household staff scrambled, attempting to restore order. The local constable, Mr. Jenkins, was promptly summoned, his demeanour calm but grave. He quickly secured the scene, barring entry and exit. Among the guests, whispers fluttered like restless birds. Who among them could have committed such a brazen theft? And murder? The estate was vast, yet the doors had been locked since the evening began, and no one could explain how the chronometer had disappeared, or how Thomas Blythe met his fate. Amid the mounting tension, a small, impeccably dressed figure arrived with quiet authority. Hercule Poirot stepped through the grand doorway, his eyes instantly assessing, his every movement a study in precision. "Messieurs, mesdames," he began in his unmistakable accent, "we find ourselves confronted with a most perplexing puzzle. The disappearance of an object such as the chronometer and the death of its custodian cannot be coincidental." He surveyed the crowd, noting their reactions. Sir Reginald's brow furrowed, a flicker of unease betraying his otherwise composed mask. Miss Eloise's fingers trembled as she clutched a handkerchief. Professor Langley averted his gaze, his mind no doubt racing through historical parallels. Mr. Fenwick adjusted his cufflinks nervously, while Dr. Vaughan's eyes searched the room, as if seeking the hidden currents beneath the surface. Poirot's gaze settled briefly on Lady Beatrice, who stood rigid, her usual composure fractured. "Madam, you must tell us everything that transpired this evening, every detail, no matter how trivial it may seem." As the guests gathered near the body and the empty pedestal, Poirot's mind began its intricate work. Already, subtle tensions whispered to him, the slight inconsistencies in Sir Reginald's statements, the way Miss Eloise avoided certain topics, the too quick smile from Mr. Fenwick, and the reserved silence of Professor Langley. Above all, the question hung like a spectre. Who had the motive, the opportunity, and the cunning to commit such a crime? Tonight, beneath the glittering chandeliers and the facade of civility, secrets would unravel. The chronometer's final epoch had begun, and only Poirot's little grey cells held the key. Chapter 2. The First Clues. The grand hall had quieted, but the tension within its walls was far from subdued. Poirot, standing near the empty pedestal, began his meticulous examination. The glittering crowd had been dispersed into smaller clusters, their whispers a low hum beneath the detective's keen gaze. Constable Jenkins awaited Poirot's instructions, while Lady Beatrice hovered anxiously nearby. Poirot's sharp eyes roamed the scene, noticing details invisible to the casual observer. First, he examined the pedestal where the chronometer had rested moments before. The velvet covering, though hastily removed, showed no signs of damage. No fibres clung to the floor, and no obvious marks suggested a struggle at that spot. "Notice, mon ami," Poirot gestured to Jenkins. "There is no sign of forced entry here. The theft was clearly executed with great care." The constable nodded but appeared puzzled. Poirot's gaze then moved to the body of Thomas Blythe. The curator's fall was awkward but not chaotic. His hands lay neatly folded, as if he had been caught by surprise rather than in a fierce struggle. "Observe the wound," Poirot said, crouching by the body. "A single blow to the temple, a precise well-aimed strike. One blow, mon ami, no more, no less." The scene suggested the murderer was swift and practised. No hesitation, no frenzy. Poirot stood and turned to the gathered witnesses. "Tell me, what was the last known time Monsieur Blythe was seen alive?" Lady Beatrice spoke, voice trembling. "Just before the unveiling I saw him near the east wing corridor. He was speaking to Mr. Fenwick, I believe." A ripple passed through the group. Poirot noted Fenwick's quick glance away, his smile faltering for a moment. "Interesting," Poirot mused aloud. "And does anyone recall seeing the chronometer during that conversation?" No one could say for sure. Poirot's attention shifted to the windows lining the gallery. They were all securely latched, the heavy velvet drapes drawn tight. No signs of forced entry or escape. The doors, too, remained locked from the inside since the evening began. Therefore, Poirot deduced, the culprit must be among us, monsieur and mesdames. The thief walked among the guests like any other. The assembled company exchanged uneasy looks. "Now," Poirot continued, "there is something else peculiar." He pointed to a polished marble floor near the body. "Notice these faint scratches, scratches that seem to have been recently made. They do not match the usual wear." Jenkins bent down, inspecting the marks. "They could be from a shoe or perhaps a tool dragged across." Poirot nodded. "Indeed. Perhaps the struggle was more subtle, confined to a brief moment and hidden from the eyes of others." His gaze fell on a nearby velvet rope, part of the display arrangement. The cord was twisted, one end frayed. An attempt to conceal the chronometer quickly, perhaps. The detective then requested the guests to gather any personal belongings they might have removed or misplaced that evening. As the search began, Miss Eloise Hartford approached Poirot quietly. "Monsieur Poirot, I feel compelled to tell you something, though I fear it may complicate matters." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, complications are the very essence of a mystery." She hesitated. "I noticed earlier that Mr. Fenwick was carrying a small, oddly shaped case, something I thought was a prop from his latest play. But now, I wonder if it could be connected." Poirot nodded slowly. "A valuable observation. The smallest detail can unravel the largest knot." Meanwhile, Professor Langley stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles nervously. "I confess I have been watching Mr. Fenwick too," he admitted. "His movements were peculiar. He seemed restless, often glancing toward the gallery as if expecting something." Fenwick himself interjected, a nervous edge to his voice. "I was merely excited about the evening. The chronometer's mystery is the talk of the town, after all." "Certainly," Poirot replied, "but excitement can sometimes mask deeper motives." Dr. Helena Vaughan observed all, her expression unreadable. "We must also consider psychological elements, the fear, the tension, the need to conceal. The murderer likely sought not only to steal but to intimidate." Poirot smiled faintly. "Madame, you touch on what I have been considering. The crime is not merely about possession, but about power. control over others through fear and secrets. The detective turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madam, can you tell me about any recent disputes Monsieur Blythe may have had? Enemies? Disagreements?" Lady Beatrice sighed deeply. Thomas was devoted but a difficult man. There was talk that he wished to sell the chronometer to a private collector abroad. Some feared he might betray the family's trust. A ripple of murmurs followed this revelation. Poirot's eyes shone with intensity. "There, mesdames and messieurs, is the first true motive. But motive alone is not enough. The question remains, who had the means and the nerve?" As the evening wore on, Poirot retreated to a quiet corner, reviewing his observations with deliberate care. There were many threads, but the pattern was yet unclear. The scratches on the floor, Fenwick's suspicious case, Blythe's final conversation, each was a piece in a complicated puzzle. And somewhere among these assembled guests the culprit waited, their heart beating with the dangerous rhythm of a secret soon to be uncovered. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. The guests were summoned to the drawing room, a grand chamber lined with ancient tapestries and heavy oak panelling, where Poirot had requested their presence. The atmosphere was thick with unease. Beneath the polished veneer of civility, every face bore the subtle marks of suspicion and guarded anxiety. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, still clutching her pearl necklace with trembling fingers, sat stiffly on a crimson velvet settee. Poirot took his place at the head of the room, his sharp eyes sweeping over the assembled circle, an eclectic assembly whose interwoven histories and concealed motives promised a tangled web. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, "before we proceed with inquiries, it is essential that we know one another fully. Every detail of your background, your connection to the estate and Monsieur Blythe, and any reason you might have to covet the Ashcombe chronometer." The first to speak was Sir Reginald Claremont, a tall man with a carefully maintained beard and an air of commanding authority. "I am a financier, as you know, Monsieur Poirot. I have had business dealings with Lady Beatrice and the Ashcombe family for many years. My interest in the chronometer is purely academic. Such antiques hold not only monetary but historical value. I assure you I have no cause to harm Mr. Blythe." Poirot studied him, noting the tension in Reginald's jaw and the brief flicker of impatience in his eyes. "Business dealings often conceal personal ambitions, monsieur, but we shall come to that later." Miss Eloise Hertford, the young heiress, then spoke in a voice as soft as silk but edged with steel. "I am a distant cousin of Lady Beatrice, visiting after many years abroad. Monsieur Blythe had been kind enough to share stories of our family's heritage, which I find fascinating. I admit I coveted the chance to see the chronometer, family legend after all, but nothing more." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Family legends can sometimes be a cloak for deeper secrets, mademoiselle." Professor Archibald Langley adjusted his spectacles nervously and cleared his throat. "I am an historian specializing in early 18th century artifacts. The Ashcombe chronometer is an invaluable piece for my research. I was honoured to be invited to this evening. As for Mr. Blythe, I knew him professionally but had no personal quarrels." His tone was hesitant, as if reluctant to speak more. Mr. Charles Fenwick, the playwright, leaned back in his chair with a languid charm. "I confess, I am here more for entertainment than scholarship. The chronometer's tale intrigued me, and I was hoping to draw inspiration for a new play. Thomas and I spoke briefly, as Lady Beatrice mentioned. I would never harm a man over a mere object." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Inspiration can sometimes be a dangerous muse, monsieur." Lastly, Dr. Helena Vaughan, whose piercing gaze seemed to dissect the very souls of those present, spoke quietly. "As a psychiatrist, I am interested in the complexities of human behaviour. I came here to observe, to perhaps offer insight. Thomas was a patient of mine some years ago. We parted amicably, but I understand from Lady Beatrice that tensions had lately increased." A faint murmur rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice took a deep breath. Indeed, Thomas had grown restless in recent months. He confided that some were pressuring him to sell the chronometer. I feared for his safety, but I could not have imagined this tragedy. Poirot's gaze swept the group once more. "Very well. Now, I wish to remind everyone that this room is sealed. No one may leave until I say so. We're here to find the truth." The suspects exchanged glances. A fragile tension settled between them, like coiled springs ready to snap. After a pause, Poirot spoke again, his voice calm but insistent. "Let us speak candidly. Monsieur Fenwick, earlier I noticed you carried a small case. Would you care to explain its contents?" Fenwick's smile tightened. "Ah, that. It's a prop. A case for my latest script. Nothing of consequence." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Sometimes the props are more revealing than the script. Sir Reginald interjected sharply. "Are we to be judged by every small gesture and accessory this evening? I suggest we focus on facts, not theatrics." Poirot smiled gently. "Facts, monsieur, are the bones on which we drape the flesh of truth. And sometimes the smallest gesture reveals the heartbeat beneath." Miss Hartford shifted in her seat. "I overheard a conversation between Monsieur Blythe and Sir Reginald a few days ago. They were not on amicable terms, I'm afraid." Sir Reginald's face darkened. "Business disagreements, nothing more." "But," said Professor Langley, "disagreements can turn bitter, and bitterness can breed motives," Dr. Vaughan observed quietly. "Emotions are often the key to understanding actions. Fear, envy, desperation. All potent forces." Poirot nodded approvingly. "Precisely. Each of you possesses secrets, as do we all. Tonight they will come to light, one by one." As the group settled into uneasy silence, Poirot's mind raced through the myriad connections: the stolen chronometer, the murder of Thomas Blythe, and the intricate relationships among these individuals, all wove a tapestry complex and dark. Outside, the clock in the hall struck 10, a sombre reminder that time was moving inexorably forward, and somewhere within Ashcombe Estate, the truth waited patiently to be unveiled. Chapter 4. Poirot arrives. The heavy oak doors of the Ashcombe Estate's drawing room opened with a measured creak, and in stepped a figure whose presence instantly commanded attention. Dressed impeccably in a tailored grey suit, with a neat bow tie and immaculately polished shoes, Hercule Poirot entered with deliberate grace. His small stature belied the sharpness in his dark eyes, which immediately swept the room, taking in every detail, the tension in the air, the subtle glances exchanged, the nervous shifts of posture. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot intoned with his characteristic Belgian accent, "it is my privilege, and indeed my duty, to assist in uncovering the truth behind these troubling events." His gaze settled on Lady Beatrice, who, though composed, could not conceal the strain etched into her face. "Madame, I offer my deepest condolences for your loss. The death of Monsieur Blythe and the theft of the chronometer are matters requiring the utmost delicacy and precision." Poirot's eyes then travelled to each suspect in turn, noting minute details with the practised acuity of a master detective. Sir Reginald's jaw was tight, lips pressed firmly. Miss Eloise's hand trembled slightly as she clasped her fan. Professor Langley avoided eye contact, his brow furrowed as though calculating. Mr. Fenwick's casual smile appeared strained, as if it were a mask rather than genuine amusement. Dr. Vaughan's steady gaze was both analytical and cautious. Poirot cleared his throat. "Permit me to share an observation. The official version of events, that the theft and murder are coincidental, is, I fear, erroneous. The evidence points to a calculated and interconnected act." The assembled company stirred uneasily. "Indeed," Poirot continued, "the method of the crime suggests a perpetrator skilled in subtlety. The wound inflicted upon Monsieur Blythe was precise. There was no struggle, or if one occurred, it was brief and controlled. The thief knew what they sought and how to avoid detection." Lady Beatrice nodded solemnly. "Thomas was careful, but so too is the person who harmed him." Poirot's gaze returned to the suspects. "It is clear that the thief remains among us. No window was forced, no door unlocked after the gathering began. Each guest had opportunity, but opportunity without motive is irrelevant." He paused, folding his hands behind his back, the very picture of calm control. "Allow me to give you my first impressions of those before me. Sir Reginald Claremont exhibits the air of one accustomed to command, yet his gaze shifts swiftly when questioned about his whereabouts earlier this evening. There is an unease beneath his polished exterior." Sir Reginald's lips tightened in response, but he said nothing. Miss Eloise Hartford carries herself with a mixture of grace and guarded reserve. Her knowledge of the family's history is perhaps deeper than she admits, and such knowledge can be a powerful motivator. Eloise's cheeks flushed faintly. Professor Langley's scholarly demeanour is genuine, Yet I detect a hesitation, as if reluctant to reveal the full extent of his relationship with Monsieur Blythe. The professor cleared his throat. Mr. Charles Fenwick, your charm is well known, but charm can mask duplicity. Your sudden nervousness when questioned about your small case is notable. Fenwick's smile flickered uneasily. Finally, Dr. Helena Vaughan's calm observation is invaluable, yet even the keenest mind can conceal personal stakes behind professional detachment. Dr. Vaughan inclined her head slightly, unshaken. Poirot then addressed the room as a whole. My method is simple. I observe, I listen, I have a question. I seek inconsistencies, those small contradictions in speech, manner, and behaviour that betray the guilty. He moved toward the window, looking out briefly at the sprawling grounds bathed in moonlight. Tonight, each of you will be asked to recount your movements, your interactions, and any information you withheld thus far. Nothing is too trivial. The truth often hides in the smallest detail. Turning back, Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. I trust that with patience and candour, the puzzle will unravel. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the tension tempered by the arrival of the great detective and the promise of clarity. Lady Beatrice took a deep breath. Monsieur Poirot, I place my trust in you. The guests exchanged uncertain looks, each wondering what the detective's scrutiny might uncover. As Poirot took his seat, the clock in the hallway struck the hour, its steady chime underscoring the gravity of the night's unfolding mystery. Outside the drawing room, unseen, the shadows lengthened, and the chronometer's final epoch had truly begun. Chapter 5. Initial Interviews. Begin. Poirot settled himself comfortably in a high-backed leather chair near the fireplace, the flickering flames casting long shadows that danced across the ornate room. The suspects were gathered before him, each to be questioned in turn, a procedure Poirot approached with the precision of a surgeon. He motioned first to Sir Reginald Claremont, whose composed exterior masked an unmistakable tension. Sir Reginald, please recount your movements this evening from your arrival, until the discovery of Monsieur Blythe's body. Reginald's voice was steady but measured. I arrived shortly after 6, greeted Lady Beatrice, and spent the first hour speaking with various guests in the main hall. I did not leave the vicinity until I was called to witness the unveiling. I assure you, I had no reason to harm Monsieur Blythe. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And your relationship with Monsieur Blythe, how would you describe it? A professional acquaintance, Reginald replied. I respected him, but our interests occasionally clashed, particularly regarding the estate's finances. Poirot's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Interesting. Next came Miss Eloise Hertford. Her eyes were bright but wary. I arrived late, after travelling from Paris. I sought only to reconnect with family and admire the chronometer. I was near the gallery before the unveiling, speaking with Professor Langley. And what of your conversation with Monsieur Fenwick earlier? Poirot asked softly. Eloise hesitated. Just pleasantries, nothing more. Poirot made discreet note. Professor Archibald Langley was summoned next. His scholarly manner gave way to nervousness under Poirot's scrutiny. I was reviewing some documents in the library and later joined Miss Hertford near the gallery. I did not see Monsieur Blythe after that, but I was aware of his movements through the house. Your interest in the chronometer is well known, Poirot said. Would you say Monsieur Blythe was cooperative with your research? Langley sighed. He was protective of the chronometer, reluctant to share certain information. I sensed tension, but I did not foresee such tragedy. Poirot's gaze remained fixed. Mr. Charles Fenwick leaned back, a faint smirk lingering. I spent much of the evening mingling, as is my habit. I was near the gallery at the time of the theft, but I was speaking to Lady Beatrice. Others can confirm. Lady Beatrice, is that correct? Poirot inquired. Lady Beatrice nodded solemnly. Yes, Monsieur Fenwick was with me. Poirot's eyes flicked to Fenwick. Yet your small case, monsieur. What does it contain? Fenwick's smile faltered. Personal belongings, nothing related to the crime. Dr. Helena Vaughan was last. Her calm voice carried authority. I observed the guests, noted tensions and subtle reactions. I spoke briefly with Monsieur Blythe earlier, who seemed troubled. Beyond that, I had no direct involvement. Poirot inclined his head. Thank you, madame. He paused, steepling his fingers. Now, I ask each of you to consider carefully your answers. Inconsistencies, however small, may hold the key. Monsieur Blythe was not killed by accident, nor did the chronometer vanish without design. He then addressed the group as a whole. There is a matter of timing. Monsieur Blythe's last confirmed sighting was near the East Wing corridor, speaking with Monsieur Fenwick. This is a crucial detail. Sir Reginald shifted uneasily. And you believe Monsieur Fenwick is involved? Poirot smiled faintly. I suspect nothing without evidence, monsieur. I merely note what others have observed. Miss Hartford glanced nervously at Fenwick. I heard raised voices between them earlier this evening. Fenwick's eyes darkened. A disagreement over trivial matters. Trivial to some, Poirot said, can be motive for others. As the interview concluded, Poirot rose. I shall take time to consider these accounts. Meanwhile, I advise you all to remain accessible and forthcoming. The guests dispersed quietly, each lost in their own thoughts. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together fragments, a casual word here, a nervous glance there. The tangled threads of motive and opportunity wove themselves ever tighter. Outside, the estate lay silent beneath a pale moon, but inside the shadows deepened. The game had begun, and Poirot's little grey cells were already turning. Chapter 6. First false lead. The following morning dawned grey and damp, casting a sombre light over the Ashcombe estate. The guests, now uneasy prisoners of circumstance, gathered once more in the drawing-room. Poirot had spent the night reviewing his notes, and the calm exterior he presented belied the restless activity of his mind. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, addressing the tense assembly, last evening's testimonies have provided fertile ground for thought. Yet, as ever, appearances can deceive. His gaze fixed on Mr. Charles Fenwick, who sat with a forced composure. Monsieur Fenwick, you were present near Monsieur Blythe shortly before the tragedy. Some witnesses overheard a heated exchange between you two. Care to elaborate? Fenwick's eyes flickered momentarily. It was a disagreement over personal matters. Nothing more. I would never harm a man. Poirot inclined his head slowly. Personal matters, yes. Yet such matters can be volatile. Poirot then revealed a detail that sent a ripple through the room. Yesterday, a small vial was discovered hidden in Monsieur Fenwick's room, containing a substance that preliminary tests suggest to be a mild poison. Gasps echoed. Fenwick's face paled. This is preposterous. I have no reason to poison anyone. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth. Poison? But Thomas was struck on the head, not poisoned. Indeed, madame, Poirot replied, but the presence of this vial cannot be ignored. It raises a troubling question. Was there a second attempt on Monsieur Blythe's life, or another intended victim? Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. This sounds like a desperate attempt to incriminate Monsieur Fenwick. Poirot smiled thinly. Or an unfortunate truth. The vial was found near where Monsieur Fenwick was lodging, and no explanation has yet been offered for its presence. Fenwick stood abruptly, his voice rising. This is slander. I demand proof beyond a mere vial. Poirot's eyes glittered. Proof requires patience. But consider this. Monsieur Fenwick's nervous behaviour, his presence at the gallery, and now the vial. Coincidence, or something more? The room fell silent, suspicion thick in the air. Miss Eloise, however, spoke softly. Monsieur Fenwick seemed uneasy, but I doubt he is capable of murder. Could someone be framing him? Poirot nodded thoughtfully. An astute observation, mademoiselle. In fact, this false lead may well be a deliberate misdirection, by the true culprit no less. Professor Langley cleared his throat. If Monsieur Fenwick is innocent, who then might benefit from casting suspicion upon him? That, monsieur, Poirot replied, is the very question we must answer. Turning to the assembled company, Poirot said, The thief is clever. Not only did they strike swiftly, but they also sought to divert our attention. We must look beyond the obvious. Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. I fear the web is more tangled than I imagined. Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Fear not, madame. The truth is like the chronometer itself, precise, inevitable, and always keeping perfect time. He then directed Jenkins and the household staff to intensify their search for further evidence, especially any signs of additional threats or secret correspondences. As the guests dispersed, Poirot remained seated, contemplating the false lead. It was a critical moment. The diversion served to test the investigators' resolve and discern who among the suspects had the cunning to manipulate perceptions. The chronometer's mystery deepened, the shadows lengthening. Yet, within Poirot's brilliant mind, the puzzle pieces were beginning to align. Outside, rain began to fall softly, a rhythmic patter that echoed the steady ticking of time, the time toward revelation. Chapter 7. The Psychological Game. The rain had ceased by midday, but a heavy stillness lingered in the air, thickening the tension that clung to the walls of Ashcombe Estate. In the drawing-room, Poirot sat quietly, his fingers steepled as he observed the restless suspects, each prisoner of their own nerves and secrets. The detective knew that beyond facts and evidence lay the realm of the mind, the subtle interplay of fear, guilt, and deception. Here Poirot excelled. He rose and addressed the group with measured calm. Mesdames et messieurs, truth often reveals itself not through words alone, but in the silences between them, in the eyes, the hesitation, the slip of the tongue. Poirot's gaze fixed first on Sir Reginald Claremont. Monsieur, you maintain a stern composure. Yet earlier, when questioned about your dealings with Monsieur Blythe, your voice betrayed a flicker of impatience. Tell me, does business strain your conscience? Reginald's jaw tightened, but he answered evenly. Business is not meant to be soft, Monsieur Poirot. It is a matter of survival. Poirot smiled slightly. Indeed, survival sometimes demands difficult choices others might judge harshly. He turned to Miss Eloise Hartford. Mademoiselle, you claim to be a distant relative, yet your knowledge of the family's secrets seems unusually intimate. Why the reticence to share more? Eloise's hands clenched tightly. Some things are better left unspoken. But silence can be a form of speech, Poirot mused. Your refusal to speak may be a shield, or a weapon. Professor Langley shifted uncomfortably under Poirot's scrutiny. I assure you, my intentions were purely academic. Any tensions with Monsieur Blythe were professional, nothing personal. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Yet the professor's face reddens slightly when the chronometer is mentioned. Langley swallowed. It is a prized artifact, of course. True, Poirot acknowledged, but prized things often inspire envy, and that, monsieur, can be a powerful motive. He fixed Mr. Charles Fenwick with a piercing stare. Monsieur, your nervousness over the discovered vial betrays fear. Fear of consequence, or perhaps fear of exposure? Fenwick's smile faltered. I am innocent, I swear it. Your protestation is noted, Poirot said, but innocence is not proven by words alone. Finally, Poirot regarded Dr. Helena Vaughan, who had listened silently thus far. Madame, your profession requires penetrating insight into the human mind. What do you make of these tensions? Dr. Vaughan's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Each of you carries a burden, regret, ambition, fear. The murderer is likely someone adept at masking true intent, using others as pawns in a dangerous game. Poirot nodded. Exactly, and so the game begins. He then addressed the group collectively. I intend to observe your reactions carefully. In the coming days, small provocations and questions will be posed, subtle tests to unravel who can withstand the pressure and who will falter. Lady Beatrice shivered slightly. This is most unsettling. Poirot smiled reassuringly. Mais oui, madame. Yet it is necessary. The mind that committed this crime cannot resist the right prompt. As the afternoon wore on, Poirot engaged each suspect with carefully crafted questions, watching their micro-expressions. The tightening of a lip, a fleeting glance, the tapping of a finger. His little grey cells were alive with the dance of human psychology. A sudden sharp intake of breath from Miss Eloise as an innocuous question, a momentary narrowing of Sir Reginald's eyes when his finances were mentioned, a subtle tremor in Professor Langley's voice when asked about the chronometer's provenance. All signs that whispered secrets beyond spoken words. Poirot retired later to his chamber, alone with his thoughts. The psychological game was in motion, and already the walls were beginning to close in on the guilty party. Outside, the estate stood silent beneath a gathering twilight. The chronometer's final epoch was ticking relentlessly forward. Chapter 8. A Secondary Mystery. The heavy curtains of Ashcombe Estate were drawn tight against the encroaching night, the flickering candlelight casting elongated shadows across the walls of the library. The tension among the guests had not abated since the morning's revelations, Rather, it seemed to have deepened, a silent weight pressing down on every conversation and glance. Just as the grandfather clock tolled 8, breaking the uneasy silence, a sharp, breathless voice interrupted the gathering. "Madam, there's been another terrible incident." The maid burst into the room, face pale and eyes wide. "The will! Lady Beatrice's last will and testament! It's missing from the safe!" A collective gasp rose, the air suddenly thick with shock and fear. Lady Beatrice clutched her chest, her voice trembling. "Impossible! That document contains everything! It cannot be gone!" Poirot rose from his seat immediately, the calm precision in his movements cutting through the mounting hysteria. "Mesdames et messieurs, it appears our mystery has deepened beyond the theft of the chronometer and the murder of Monsieur Bleeth." He faced the assembled suspects, his gaze sharp and unwavering. A second theft of such grave importance suggests a wider plot, one that threatens to unravel the very fabric of this household. Lady Beatrice, still pale but steadying herself, explained, "The will was kept in the family safe within my private study. Only me and Monsieur Bleeth knew the combination. No one else had access." Poirot's eyes flicked around the room. "This knowledge narrows our field considerably. With Monsieur Bleeth deceased, the thief must have obtained the combination by other means, through coercion, deception, or betrayal." Professor Langley, his spectacles reflecting the candlelight, interjected cautiously, "Could someone have broken into the study?" Poirot shook his head. No signs of forced entry were found. This was a crime of precision, as with the others. The culprit is cunning. Sir Reginald Claremont leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "An inside job, then?" "Most assuredly," Poirot replied. "The will's disappearance is not a mere act of theft. It is a weapon, a threat designed to unsettle alliances and conceal motives." Miss Eloise Hertford covered her mouth with trembling fingers. What secrets could they hold that someone would risk so much to hide? Poirot gave a slight nod. In families such as these, documents like a will can contain revelations powerful enough to destroy reputations and fortunes. Such secrets can breed hatred, jealousy, and desperation. Dr. Helena Vaughan's steady voice offered insight. "The will's vanishing is as much psychological as it is criminal. It exerts pressure on the household, forcing fissures to appear and alliances to shift." The maid's arrival had unsettled the delicate balance in the room, and as whispers began to spread, Poirot raised his hand for silence. "I shall need access to the study," he said, "and all movements in and out of that room must be accounted for from the moment the will was last seen." Turning to Jenkins, the constable, he continued, "Secure the room immediately and question the staff who might have been near the study." Poirot then addressed the suspects directly. "You have all been present since this evening began, yet none have accounted fully for your whereabouts at all times. The key to this second crime lies in understanding who benefited most from this disappearance." Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened with unshed tears. This could change everything. It was rewritten recently, secrets buried, provisions altered. Professor Langley leaned forward. If the will were to fall into the wrong hands, it could mean ruin for some, and unexpected gain for others. Poirot's gaze lingered on Sir Reginald and Miss Eloise, whose subtle exchange did not go unnoticed. "The disappearance of the will," Poirot concluded gravely, "is no accident. It is a calculated act to manipulate the investigation, to pressure the family and those involved." The room fell silent, save for the crackling of the fireplace. Outside, the estate was cloaked in darkness, but inside, the stakes had never been higher. Poirot retreated momentarily to examine the study's door and windows himself. He found no evidence of tampering, confirming his earlier suspicions. The thief was someone trusted, someone with intimate knowledge. Back in the library, Poirot's mind raced through the possibilities. The chronometer, the murder, the stolen will, they formed a trio of crimes connected by threads of greed, fear, and deception. As the guests waited, strained and watchful, Poirot knew that each second brought the culprit closer to exposure, or to their next desperate move. The final epoch of the chronometer was unfolding, each tick a step closer to truth. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. The next morning, a thin mist clung to the sprawling grounds of Ashcombe Estate, lending the landscape a spectral quality. Inside the drawing room, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Poirot stood before the assembled guests, ready to unravel yet another layer of the mystery. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm yet imbued with quiet authority. "As we delve deeper, it becomes clear that the threads connecting these events are more tangled than we first believed." He paused, letting his gaze settle on each person in turn. "I have discovered several hidden relationships and old grudges, secrets long buried that may have resurfaced with deadly consequences." Lady Beatrice looked concerned but resolute. "Please, Monsieur Poirot, tell us what you have learned." Poirot motioned to Jenkins, who stepped forward carrying a small bundle of papers. "These letters," Poirot explained, "were found hidden in Monsieur Blythe's private study. They reveal financial entanglements and personal disputes among some of you." He handed the documents to Sir Reginald. "Monsieur Clermont, here is a correspondence indicating a recent business disagreement with Monsieur Blythe concerning the estate's investments." Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "I admit there were disputes, but nothing worth murder." Poirot's eyes flicked to Miss Eloise. "Mademoiselle Hertford, these letters reveal a secret financial dependency you had on Lady Beatrice's family, debts you hoped to conceal." Eloise's face paled. "I had hoped that it would remain private." "To conceal debts often leads to desperation," Poirot said gently. Poirot then addressed Professor Langley. "You will find this note of interest." He handed over a letter hinting at a failed research partnership with Monsieur Blythe, ending bitterly. Langley swallowed hard. "We parted on bad terms. I wanted the chronometer for study, but Thomas was unwilling." Poirot's gaze shifted to Mr. Fenwick. "And you, monsieur, will find here evidence of a long-standing rivalry with Monsieur Blythe. Not merely professional, but personal in nature." Fenwick's expression darkened. "That rivalry was known, but I never wished him harm." Dr. Vaughan listened intently as Poirot continued. "Finally, Lady Beatrice, these letters show that Monsieur Blythe feared betrayal within the family, that someone sought to take advantage of his position." Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "I feared as much." Poirot folded the papers. These hidden connections, financial pressures, rivalries, old wounds, form the backdrop against which this tragedy occurred. Each of you is more deeply entangled than appearances suggest." He fixed the room with a steady look. The killer exploited these tensions, weaving deception to divert suspicion and hide behind secrets. As murmurs spread, Poirot raised a hand. "Tonight, I intend to observe these relationships further. The alliances and rivalries will reveal much, especially as pressure mounts." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. A fragile web of trust had already begun to unravel. Later, as the day wore on, Poirot retreated to a quiet corner. His mind sifted through the intricate connections, weighing each against the evidence and behaviour observed. The complex emotional stakes entwined with greed and fear made the mystery a labyrinth. Yet in the silence, a single, elusive truth awaited discovery. Outside, the estate's clock tower chimed the hour, a solemn reminder that time, like the chronometer itself, marched steadily toward revelation. Chapter 10. Poirot's Secret Clue. The evening sun filtered through the tall, mullioned windows of Ashcombe's library, casting a golden hue that belied the heavy mood within. Poirot sat quietly in a leather armchair, eyes closed briefly as he summoned his famous little grey cells to unravel the mounting enigmas. The theft of the chronometer, the murder of Monsieur Blythe, the missing will. Each puzzle was complex in isolation, but Poirot sensed an invisible thread weaving them all together. Yet amid the swirl of suspicions and half-truths, one subtle detail had lodged itself firmly in his mind, waiting to be fully understood. He opened his eyes, focusing sharply on the small glass case where the broken clasp of the velvet cord, the very cord from the chronometer's display, rested. The slight fraying and the precise cut spoke of deliberate action, but Poirot was convinced there was more than met the eye. Stepping over to the cabinet, he carefully examined the polished floor beneath it. There, faint yet distinct, were several barely visible scuff marks, too irregular to be accidental, too precise to be random. Poirot knelt, brushing a fingertip lightly over one mark. It was a tiny crescent-shaped scratch, likely from a small metallic object dragged or scraped. He stood, speaking softly to Jenkins, the constable. Have the staff been questioned about any misplaced items, a tool, a key, anything small and metal? Jenkins nodded. Several reported a small ornate key missing from Lady Beatrice's desk this morning, monsieur. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, this is no coincidence. A key missing, scratches near the display, and the broken velvet cord, all pieces of a deliberate pattern. He walked slowly to the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds. The key, mes amis, is the literal and figurative key to this mystery. Whoever took it had not only access but knowledge of the estate's inner workings. Turning back inside, Poirot addressed Lady Beatrice. Madame, where was this key kept, and who had access? Lady Beatrice responded, In my desk drawer, locked. Only I and Thomas had access to it. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And yet it is missing. He turned toward the suspects gathered nearby, his voice steady but commanding. This key may unlock a hidden compartment or a secondary safe. I shall investigate immediately. Poirot then conferred privately with Jenkins and the household staff, ordering a thorough search of the estate's private rooms and storage areas, especially those not yet inspected. As the search commenced, Poirot sat back, contemplating the significance of the clue. It was small, almost insignificant, a lost key, but its implications were profound. It suggested premeditation and intimate knowledge, indicating the thief was no outsider, but someone close. The detective's mind raced through the possibilities, connecting each suspect's background and motives to this revelation. Later, as the household gathered for dinner, Poirot allowed a faint smile. Patience, mesdames et messieurs. The truth is within reach, though hidden in the smallest detail. The guests exchanged nervous glances, each wondering who among them held the missing key, not just to a door, but to their fate. Outside, twilight deepened, and the chronometer's final epoch ticked inexorably onward. Chapter 11. Tensions rise. The drawing-room hummed with a nervous energy that grew heavier as the evening wore on. Guests who had once masked their unease with polite conversation now exchanged thinly veiled glances, their smiles brittle and faltering. The missing key, the secret compartments, and the whispered rumours of hidden motives had begun to fracture the fragile veneer of civility. Poirot sat quietly in his chair, observing the subtle shifts in demeanour, the tightening of jaws, the furtive avoidance of eye contact, the barely perceptible tremble of hands. The psychological pressure was mounting, and the suspects were responding in ways that revealed more than they intended. Sir Reginald Claremont, usually the epitome of control, paced the length of the room with a restless energy, fingers tapping against his chin as if calculating some unseen equation. His glances toward Miss Eloise Hertford were sharp and frequent, suggesting a silent communication, or perhaps a simmering resentment. Miss Eloise, for her part, appeared guarded and defensive, her posture stiff as she sat near the fireplace. Her eyes darted nervously toward Mr. Charles Fenwick whenever he spoke, and she clutched her fan tightly as if it were a talisman against the growing tension. Professor Archibald Langley seemed more withdrawn than ever, retreating into the shadows as he quietly reviewed papers from Monsieur Blythe's study. Yet even in his silence there was a tension that betrayed his calm facade. Dr. Helena Vaughan, ever composed, had taken on the role of quiet observer, her keen eyes missing nothing. She occasionally interjected with clinical remarks on the psychological states of those present, though her own expression remained inscrutable. Poirot rose slowly and addressed the room. Mesdames et messieurs, as the pressure increases, so too do the masks slip. It is in these moments that truth most often reveals itself. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I have observed several shifts in alliances, whispers behind backs, sudden accusations, and subtle gestures of suspicion. Such fractures are expected, but they tell us much about who stands to benefit. Sir Reginald stopped pacing and spoke, voice low but sharp. It is obvious to me that some among us seek to manipulate this investigation for their own ends. This is a game of power as much as justice. Miss Eloise's eyes flashed. And who would that be, Sir Reginald? You, perhaps? A ripple of tension passed through the room. Poirot raised a hand to restore order. Enough. This is not the time for recriminations, but for observation. He turned his gaze to Fenwick, who was visibly unsettled by the rising tensions. Monsieur Fenwick, you have been accused, and defences have been raised. Tell us plainly, what do you have to say for yourself?" Fenwick took a deep breath. "I stand innocent of all accusations, but I will admit the mounting suspicion and mistrust make this an intolerable evening." Poirot nodded. "Understandable, but the question remains, who gains from this turmoil? Who profits when trust dissolves?" He glanced briefly toward Lady Beatrice, who sat quietly, her expression weary but determined. "Madame, this household is fraying. We must hold together if justice is to be served." As the evening deepened, small fractures grew wider. The guests whispered in corners, alliances formed and dissolved like shifting sand. Poirot observed quietly, cataloguing every glance and gesture. The night stretched onward, each moment bringing the suspects closer to revealing what they wished to hide. Outside, the wind whispered through the ancient trees, as if echoing the restless secrets within Ashcombe Estate. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. The atmosphere in the drawing-room was taut as a drawn bowstring. The guests sat uneasy, their eyes darting like wary animals. Poirot's gaze, however, was steady, fixed upon a single figure, Miss Eloise Hertford. Her composure had begun to crack. Subtle, but unmistakable. The moment had come. "Mademoiselle Hertford," Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing, "I believe it is time we spoke candidly." Eloise's fingers clenched the edge of her chair. Her cheeks flushed. "I have told you everything I know." "Perhaps not everything," Poirot replied, rising to his feet. "You spoke of debts and secrets, yet you withheld the most crucial part, the letter found in Monsieur Blythe's study." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Miss Eloise's eyes flicked toward Lady Beatrice, who nodded slightly. Poirot continued. "This letter, penned by Monsieur Blythe, revealed a long-held secret. Your true parentage is not as you believe. You're not a distant cousin, but the illegitimate daughter of Lady Beatrice's late husband." Eloise's face paled, her voice barely a whisper. That is not true." "Ah, but it is written here," Poirot said, holding the folded paper aloft. "Monsieur Blythe intended to reveal this upon his retirement. Fearing the consequences," Eloise's lips trembled. "I was told to keep it secret. It would destroy the family. Yet such a secret provides motive, does it not? A desire to claim inheritance, to change one's fate." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And the night of the murder, you were seen near the East Wing corridor speaking with Monsieur Fenwick. Witnesses overheard a heated argument. What was discussed?" Eloise hesitated, then broke down. "He threatened to expose me if I did not pay him. I refused." Sir Reginald's face twisted with anger. "So you plotted murder?" "No," Eloise cried. "I wanted to protect my future, but not like this." Poirot turned to Fenwick. "Monsieur, your threats were known, yet you claim innocence." Fenwick's gaze hardened. "I demanded money, yes, but I did not kill Thomas." Poirot paced slowly. "Then who?" He paused, eyes locking on the rest of the company. "The murderer made a crucial mistake. Knowledge of the missing key and the secret safe compartment. Only someone close to Lady Beatrice could know this." Lady Beatrice gasped. "But who?" Poirot's voice dropped. "Monsieur Fenwick tried to shift blame, but the real culprit is someone who manipulated all of you, playing on fears and secrets." A sharp cry from Dr. Vaughan interrupted. "I saw it. I saw the figure near the study window last night, someone none of you suspected." All eyes turned. Poirot nodded gravely. "Yes, and that person has been weaving a web of deceit." The room grew still, charged with silent accusation. Poirot's voice rose, commanding attention. "Mademoiselle Eloise, your desperation is clear, but the truth must emerge. The real murderer is among us, and I shall reveal them before the night ends." The guests held their breath as Poirot's little grey cells began their final intricate dance. Outside, the estate stood silent, but inside, the final act was unfolding. Chapter 13. A Desperate Attempt to Escape. The air within Ashcombe Estate had grown thick with unease as the hours passed. The candlelight flickered against the ornate walls of the drawing-room, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the secrets and lies concealed in the hearts of those gathered. The heavy silence was suddenly shattered by a sharp commotion from the grand staircase. A figure burst into the room, moving with desperate urgency. It was Sir Reginald Claremont, his usual composed demeanour replaced by wild agitation. His breath came in harsh gasps, eyes darting wildly as if hunted by invisible predators. "I cannot stay here any longer," he shouted, voice cracking under the strain. "This charade must end. I must leave before I am falsely accused and condemned." The household staff reacted immediately, rushing to intercept him, but Reginald was swift, pushing past trembling maids and startled footmen as he made a frantic dash toward the front door. His hand grasped the heavy brass handle, fingers trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Before he could turn the knob, a calm but commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Monsieur Clermont, stop! You will not leave Ashcombe Estate until this matter has been resolved." Poirot stood, small but resolute, his gaze unwavering. The weight of his presence seemed to halt Reginald mid-motion. The tension in the room was palpable, every eye fixed on the drama unfolding. Reginald froze, torn between the instinct to flee and the inescapable authority of the great detective. His chest heaved with exertion, and his voice faltered. "You have no right to detain me. I am innocent of all this madness." "Yet your attempt to flee suggests otherwise," Poirot replied gently but firmly. "Flight is often the refuge of guilt." Miss Eloise Hartford gasped, clutching the armrest of her chair with white knuckles. Dr. Helena Vaughan stepped forward, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Reginald, please calm yourself. Fleeing will only deepen suspicion." Reginald's wild gaze softened briefly as he looked around, seeming to realize the futility of his escape attempt. Poirot took a measured step closer, voice softening slightly. "Now, monsieur, tell us plainly, what is it you feared escaping from?" For a long moment Reginald said nothing. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I feared the ruin that looms over me. The debts, the failed investments, the ruin I cannot hide any longer. I thought if I remained here, I would be falsely accused of crimes I did not commit. I could not bear it." Poirot nodded slowly, understanding the pressure crushing the man, though remaining cautious. Desperation can lead even the most honourable men to dark deeds. Just then Constable Jenkins appeared at the doorway, a young maid by his side, her face pale but resolute. "A witness has come forward, Monsieur Poirot," Jenkins announced. The room hushed once more. The maid stepped forward, hands clasped tightly to still their trembling. I saw Sir Reginald near the study late last night," she said quietly, eyes downcast. "He was carrying something, wrapped in cloth. I did not want to speak before, but I could not stay silent any longer." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Monsieur Clermont, can you explain what you were carrying?" Reginald swallowed, hard, eyes flickering with panic. "It was a ledger, a record of debts and loans. I feared if those papers were discovered, my ruin would be complete. I intended to destroy the ledger to protect myself." "Did you succeed in destroying it?" Poirot asked calmly. "No," Reginald admitted, voice breaking. "I was interrupted. I had to leave it hidden somewhere." Poirot turned toward Jenkins. "Search Sir Reginald's quarters immediately." As servants hurried off, Poirot faced the gathering. "You see, the pressures within this house are immense. Attempts to hide debts, destroy evidence, silence threats. Such actions muddy the waters, making it difficult to discern truth from deception." Miss Eloise spoke softly, voice strained with emotion. "So many lies, so much fear. How can we trust anyone here?" Poirot smiled faintly, the familiar gleam of his intellect shining through. "Trust is indeed a fragile thing, mademoiselle, but with patience, observation and deduction, truth will ultimately emerge." The house was silent for a moment, the storm outside beginning anew with a steady pattering of rain against the windows. Thunder rumbled distantly, as if echoing the turmoil within. Reginald sank back into a chair, his face a mask of defeat and dread. The walls seemed to close in on him as the consequences of his desperation took hold. Poirot sat beside him briefly, speaking quietly. "You are burdened by more than debts, monsieur. The ledger is but one piece of the puzzle. Be prepared for what comes next." As the night deepened, the investigation's tension grew ever tighter. Each move, each word, each subtle gesture was a step closer to exposing the truth, and the guilty party's next desperate act. Outside Ashcombe Estate, the storm raged on, But inside, the slow, inexorable march of justice continued. The chronometer's final epoch ticked relentlessly forward, promising a reckoning none could escape. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. The storm that had battered Ashcombe Estate throughout the night had at last passed, leaving a brittle dawn pale and grey. The guests awoke, weighed down not only by the oppressive weather, but by the growing realization that the mystery had entered its final, inescapable phase. Poirot spent the early morning hours alone in the library, sifting meticulously through every scrap of evidence, every whispered confession, every fleeting gesture noted in the past days. The fragments of the puzzle, scattered and obscure, began to form a cohesive pattern. At last, a detail, overlooked by all but Poirot's keen eye, clicked into place. He rose deliberately and summoned the household to the drawing-room. The assembled company, still bruised by sleepless nights and growing distrust, fell silent as Poirot began. Mesdames et messieurs, the time has come to reveal the final piece of the puzzle, the clue that changes everything. His gaze rested on the velvet case that once housed the chronometer. Recall the scratches found beneath the display, small, precise, and crescent-shaped. Initially dismissed as trivial, these marks were the key. Poirot moved to a small table and produced a slender metallic pin, gleaming under the soft light. "This pin," he said, "is not an ordinary object. It is the tip of a rare jeweller's tool, one used to open intricate locks and hidden compartments." He looked steadily at the group. "Only one person here is known to have used such tools recently, Monsieur Fenwick." Fenwick's composure faltered, a flicker of panic crossing his features. Poirot continued, "Further, the missing key from Lady Beatrice's desk was in your possession, discovered hidden beneath your belongings." Fenwick's voice cracked. I admit I found the key, but I did not kill Monsieur Blythe." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the outburst. "Patience, monsieur. The truth requires full illumination." He paced slowly. "Monsieur Fenwick, you had opportunity, knowledge, and motive, but so too did others." Poirot's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Monsieur Blythe's murder was not a crime of passion, but calculated necessity. The key, the will, the ledger, they threatened to expose a secret that some wished buried forever. Turning to Lady Beatrice, Poirot said softly, "Your late husband's true intentions and the secret lineage of Mademoiselle Eloise Hertford brought simmering tensions to a boil." Eloise gasped, clutching her hands. Poirot's voice gained strength. "Yet the killer is the one who saw this secret as a threat to their power and fortune." He fixed his gaze on Sir Reginald. "You, monsieur, desperate to hide your financial ruin, saw in Monsieur Blythe and the will an obstacle to your salvation." Sir Reginald's eyes darkened. "I did what I must to protect myself." "But you did not wield the fatal blow," Poirot said. He then looked at Miss Eloise. "Mademoiselle, your secret parentage provided motive, but your conscience held you back." Eloise's tears fell freely. Poirot turned back to Fenwick. "Monsieur, you struck the fatal blow in a moment of panic, fearing exposure, yet your attempt to misdirect suspicion with the vial was clumsy." Fenwick sagged, defeated. Poirot raised a finger. "And there is one more." He paused, eyes glinting. "The final link." He motioned toward Dr. Vaughan. "You, madame, with your insights into the human mind, you manipulated the fears and suspicions of all present, steering blame and confusion to your advantage." Dr. Vaughan's eyes flashed with a cold calm. "A doctor must observe and control." Poirot's voice was firm. "But in controlling others, you underestimated the little grey cells of this humble detective." A tense silence followed. Poirot smiled gently. "The chronometer's final epoch has arrived, not with a bang, but with a subtle click, like the turning of a lock opened by the right key." He gestured to the constable. "Arrest these two, Monsieur Fenwick and Dr. Vaughan." As officers moved forward, Fenwick and Dr. Vaughan exchanged a brief, knowing glance, their alliance shattered by the unmasking. Lady Beatrice sighed, relief mingling with sorrow. At last, justice. Poirot turned to the room. Let this be a reminder. Secrets may be kept, but time reveals all. Outside, the first rays of sun pierced the grey clouds, illuminating the estate, and the truth that had long been hidden within its walls. Chapter 15. The Final Gathering. The morning sun rose pale and weak behind a veil of heavy clouds, As the household and guests of Ashcombe Estate assembled once more in the grand drawing-room, the air was thick with anticipation and a sombre gravity that seemed to settle over the ornate furnishings and gilded mirrors alike. Outside, the rain had ceased, but inside, a storm of secrets and revelations was about to break. Lady Beatrice, her usual regal composure tempered by exhaustion and grief, sat quietly on the crimson velvet settee. Poirot stood near the fireplace, hands folded, his eyes scanning the faces of those gathered, a collection of souls marked by suspicion, fear, and hope. The time had come to unravel the tangled web of lies and half-truths, to expose the truth hidden beneath the surface. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm yet resolute, "we are gathered here today to reconstruct the sequence of events that have cast this household into shadow. I ask each of you to listen closely, for the truth is hidden in the details, some obvious, others concealed beneath layers of deceit." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "First, consider the theft of the Ashcombe chronometer, an object of immense sentimental and historical value. It was stolen not merely for its worth, but as a symbol of power and control. The disappearance was orchestrated with great cunning, and its concealment was meant to mislead us." Poirot's gaze flicked to Sir Reginald Claremont. "Monsieur Claremont, your financial difficulties and desperate need to conceal debts provided motive. Your attempt to destroy the ledger demonstrates this clearly." Sir Reginald's lips tightened, but he said nothing. "Miss Eloise Hertford," Poirot continued, "your lineage, concealed and twisted by fear of scandal, was a catalyst for your actions. You sought to protect your claim, but your conscience and the fear of disgrace held you back from darker deeds." Eloise's hands trembled as she stared down at the floor. "Mr. Charles Fenwick," Poirot said, his tone sharpening, "your possession of the jeweller's tool and the missing key gave you access. You struck Monsieur Blythe in a panic, fearing exposure, but your attempts to frame others revealed your desperation." Fenwick's expression faltered, his eyes avoiding. Poirot's. "And Dr. Helena Vaughan," Poirot's voice dropped. "You, with your knowledge of human psychology, manipulated the fears and suspicions in this room. Your role was not that of a healer, but a puppeteer, seeking to steer the investigation away from yourself." Dr. Vaughan's face remained inscrutable, but her hands tightened. Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, your fears for the estate and family secrets were justified, yet the darkness within the household blindsided even you." He gestured toward the assembled guests. "Now I shall recount the night's events, exposing the true sequence and unmasking the murderer." With precise clarity, Poirot detailed the movements of each suspect, the subtle clues, the scratched floor, the broken velvet cord, the hidden key, and the desperate attempts to conceal truth through lies and misdirection. He described how Fenwick, driven by greed and fear, seized his chance to strike, and how Dr. Vaughan, calculating and cold, sought to cover the tracks by sowing discord and confusion. As Poirot's voice rose, the room grew tense, the weight of truth pressing upon every soul. Finally Poirot paused and fixed his gaze on Fenwick and Dr. Vaughan. "You are both guilty of crimes that threaten not only this household, but the very bonds of trust that hold society together." The pair exchanged a brief, defiant glance, but said nothing. Poirot nodded to Jenkins. "Take them into custody." As the constable moved forward, the atmosphere in the room shifted, a mixture of relief, sorrow, and the undeniable satisfaction of justice served. Lady Beatrice sighed, a weary smile breaking through. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have restored not only order but honour." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "It is always the little grey cells, madame, that triumph over the shadows." Outside, the storm clouds broke apart, revealing a pale blue sky. The first light of day bathed Ashcombe Estate in a soft glow, a symbol of renewal and the enduring power of truth. Chapter 16. The Reveal. The grand drawing-room of Ashcombe Estate was heavy with an almost tangible silence, as the assembled guests settled into their seats, faces marked by a mixture of anxiety and weary anticipation. The golden afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long, flickering shadows across the ornate carpets and polished woodwork. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the unveiling of the truth behind the tangled web of secrets, lies, and death. Hercule Poirot stood before them, his posture composed yet commanding, his keen eyes surveying each individual with a penetrating intensity. Over the past days he had pieced together the intricate threads of this dark tapestry, and now the final moment had come to pull them apart strand by strand. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and steady, "it is not without great care that I present to you the culmination of our investigation. The truth, as often is the case, is layered, complex and interwoven with human frailty." He paused briefly, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The guests exchanged anxious glances, their collective breaths held in tense expectation. "We have before us a tale of ambition, desperation, and hidden identities, a tale in which each one of you played a part, knowingly or unknowingly." Poirot's gaze fixed first on Monsieur Charles Fenwick. "Monsieur Fenwick, your possession of the jeweller's tool, a small but critical instrument, left the distinctive crescent-shaped scratches on the floor beneath the chronometer's display. This was no accident. It was the key that allowed you access to the case containing the chronometer." Fenwick's face tightened, eyes flickering nervously. "I admit to having the tool, yes, but I deny any wrongdoing." Poirot's voice sharpened slightly. "Yet the missing key from Lady Beatrice's desk was found concealed among your personal effects. Your desperate desire to acquire the chronometer was motivated not only by greed, but also by the need to conceal your mounting debts and rivalry with Monsieur Blythe." Fenwick's gaze faltered, his composure beginning to crack. "However," Poirot continued, turning now to Dr. Helena Vaughan, "the murder was not committed by Monsieur Fenwick alone. Madame Vaughan, your intimate knowledge of psychology and human behaviour allowed you to manipulate the fears and suspicions within this household, steering blame and confusion to shield the true perpetrator." Dr. Vaughan's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her silence heavy. Poirot's voice softened as he addressed Miss Eloise Hertford. "Mademoiselle, your concealed parentage, that you are the illegitimate daughter of Lady Beatrice's late husband, was a secret Monsieur Blythe planned to reveal, a truth that terrified you. Although it provided a powerful motive, your conscience prevented you from committing murder." Eloise's hands trembled as tears welled in her eyes, her body tense with suppressed emotion. Poirot's gaze swept to Sir Reginald Claremont. "Monsieur Claremont, your financial ruin drove you to attempt to destroy incriminating ledgers, yet you did not take violent action. Your desperation was felt, but your hand remained clean." Sir Reginald's lips compressed into a thin line, but he remained silent. "And Professor Langley," Poirot said gently, "you observed the unfolding events with scholarly detachment, unable to intervene." He paused before returning his attention to Fenwick and Vaughan. The fatal blow to Monsieur Blythe was dealt in a moment of panic by Monsieur Fenwick, who feared exposure of his misdeeds. Madame Vaughan's manipulations provided cover, allowing this tragedy to be hidden behind a veil of confusion. Fenwick's shoulders sagged as he confessed, "Yes, I struck him. But I never meant for it to go this far." Dr. Vaughan's voice was cold. "I did what was necessary to protect the secrets we all wish to keep." Poirot shook his head slowly. "Secrets can protect, but they also poison the soul and corrode trust." He turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, though the pain you bear is great, justice must prevail." The room was still as the magnitude of the revelation sank in. Fenwick and Vaughan exchanged a fleeting glance, their alliance broken by the unveiling. Poirot smiled faintly, the glow of triumph tempered by the sombre weight of loss. The Ashcombe chronometer's final epoch is complete, but the truth is eternal. May this serve as a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, light can be found. Outside, the first rays of the morning sun pierced through the clouds, casting a warm glow upon the estate, illuminating a new dawn and the enduring power of justice. Chapter 17. Outcome and Justice. The grand drawing-room of Ashcombe Estate was cloaked in a heavy silence as the assembled company awaited the final reckoning. The air was thick with the residue of grief, suspicion, and the countless tangled threads that had brought them to this day. Behind the high windows, grey clouds stretched across the sky, as though the heavens themselves mourned the fate of the house. At the centre of the room, Hercule Poirot stood tall and composed, his little grey cells buzzing with the culmination of days of observation, deduction, and psychological insight. The storm of secrets, lies, and desperation that had gripped Ashcombe was about to be laid bare. The faces around him were pale, taut with anxiety or resignation. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe sat on a crimson settee, the lines of grief etched deeply on her face, yet a quiet strength shone through her weary eyes. Miss Eloise Hertford's hands trembled slightly as she clutched a lace handkerchief, the revelations of her lineage and the weight of the family's secrets pressing heavily on her shoulders. Sir Reginald Claremont, his once confident demeanour shattered by the unfolding events, sat rigidly, eyes dark with regret and fear. Professor Archibald Langley, the historian who had remained mostly on the sidelines, seemed deeply burdened by the knowledge of what had transpired under his very roof, and then there were Monsieur Charles Fenwick and Madame Helena Vaughan, the two whose guilt had been exposed by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. They sat handcuffed, their faces masks of defiance and desperation. Poirot raised his hand slightly, commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, after days of inquiry and reflection, we have reached the inevitable conclusion. The truth has been uncovered, and justice is at hand. His gaze settled first on Fenwick. Monsieur Fenwick, your possession of the jeweller's tool, used to carefully open the velvet case, was the first tangible evidence connecting you to the theft of the chronometer. The crescent-shaped scratches on the floor beneath the display were your unintentional signature. Fenwick's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Furthermore, Poirot continued, the missing key from Lady Beatrice's desk was discovered concealed among your belongings, monsieur. It was the key that unlocked the secret compartment containing the will, another piece stolen to cover your tracks. Fenwick's eyes flickered, betraying the turmoil beneath his facade. I admit to taking the key and the tool, yes, but I did not kill Monsieur Blythe. Poirot nodded slowly. We shall come to that. Madame Vaughan, your role in this tragedy was more subtle, but no less critical. Your knowledge of human nature and psychology allowed you to manipulate the fears and suspicions of this household, steering attention away from Monsieur Fenwick and yourself. Madame Vaughan's cold eyes met him steadily. I did what I thought necessary to protect myself and those I cared for. Yet your protection came at a terrible cost, Poirot said softly. You orchestrated confusion and distrust, exacerbating tensions to conceal the truth. Poirot's gaze then shifted to Miss Eloise. Mademoiselle Hertford, your concealed lineage, the truth that you are Lady Beatrice's late husband's illegitimate daughter, was a secret Monsieur Blythe intended to reveal. That secret, and the fear it engendered, provided the motive for desperate actions. Eloise swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I did not wish harm. I only wanted to protect my place in this family. Your conscience spared you from committing violence, Poirot replied, but your fear was a spark in the tinderbox. Poirot's eyes turned to Sir Reginald. Monsieur Claremont, your financial ruin drove you to attempts at concealment, particularly the destruction of ledgers that exposed your debts. Though your actions were desperate, you did not strike the fatal blow. Reginald's eyes lowered, voice heavy. I tried to save what little I had left. I did not kill Thomas. Indeed, Poirot said. Professor Langley, your role was that of a silent observer, a man caught between worlds, unable or unwilling to intervene. The historian nodded slowly. I regret my inaction deeply. Poirot paced slowly, voice growing stronger. Monsieur Blythe's murder was a tragedy born of fear and greed. Monsieur Fenwick, you dealt the fatal blow in a moment of panic, fearing exposure. Madame Vaughan, your manipulation provided cover, steering suspicion away and prolonging the deception. Fenwick's shoulders slumped. Vaughan's face tightened. Poirot's voice softened, taking on a note of compassion. Yet let it be known that beneath the weight of these actions lies the complexity of human frailty, the longing for security, the terror of loss, and the desperate grasp for power. Lady Beatrice rose, tears glistening in her eyes. Though the pain remains, I find solace in knowing that the truth has finally emerged. The room remained hushed as the constable stepped forward to formally place Fenwick and Vaughan under arrest. The clinking of handcuffs was a chilling reminder of the consequences of deceit and crime. Poirot addressed the remaining guests. The path ahead will be difficult, but truth and justice have prevailed this day. May it serve as a lesson and a beacon. Miss Eloise wiped her tears, voice soft. The end of this story is not the end of us. There is healing to be done. Sir Reginald gave a small nod, a flicker of hope breaking through his despair. Perhaps there is a chance for redemption yet. Professor Langley gathered his belongings, the burden of silence lifted though the wounds remained. Outside, the storm clouds that had shadowed Ashcombe all week finally parted, allowing soft sunlight to spill over the estate grounds. The rain-washed gardens shimmered with renewed life, a symbol of rebirth. Poirot lingered a moment longer in the drawing-room, his mind already turning to the next case, yet holding a quiet gratitude for having brought closure to this one. The chronometer's final epoch, he mused, has come to its close, but the pursuit of justice and truth is endless. We must always be vigilant, for in the smallest details the greatest mysteries hide. And with that, the great detective took his leave, stepping into the brightening day, his figure receding yet forever etched in the memories of those whose lives he had touched. Understood. I'll create Chapter 18 with a strict word count of exactly 2,000 words, continuing the story smoothly with detailed narrative, character reflections, and a fitting closing to the mystery. Please hold on for a moment while I write this full chapter for you. Chapter 18, The Closing Remark. The soft glow of late afternoon bathed Ashcombe Estate in a serene light, filtering through the stained glass windows and gilding the oak-panelled walls of the grand drawing-room. The once fraught atmosphere had softened considerably, replaced by a quiet gravity as those present reflected on the revelations and reckonings of the past days. Hercule Poirot stood near the hearth, his impeccable attire as neat as ever, his demeanour calm yet vibrant with the satisfaction that accompanies the resolution of a most perplexing puzzle. Around him, the guests, Lady Beatrice, Miss Eloise, Sir Reginald, Professor Langley, and the remaining household staff had gathered in a more informal assembly, the heaviness of suspicion having lifted like morning mist. Lady Beatrice, pale but composed, looked toward Poirot with gratitude and a touch of melancholy. "Monsieur Poirot, you have restored more than just order. You have given us back our peace, fragile though it may be." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "Madam, it is always a pleasure to serve justice and bring clarity where there was confusion. Yet, we must not forget that human nature is often more intricate than even the most cunning detective can unravel." Miss Eloise, seated quietly beside Lady Beatrice, glanced at Poirot, with eyes still shadowed by the revelations of her true heritage. "Though the truth was painful, I am grateful that it has been spoken aloud. Secrets kept only festering." "Yes, mademoiselle," Poirot agreed, "for truth is like light. It cleanses and illuminates, though it may burn at first." Sir Reginald, now a humbled figure, spoke softly. "I am left with much to repair, not least the broken trust of those I wronged. But perhaps with time, healing is possible." Professor Langley nodded. "This house has seen many stories unfold, and now another has come to its close. We must remember the lessons learned here." Poirot's eyes twinkled briefly. "Indeed, monsieur, and yet I fear that the nature of human secrets and ambitions means there will always be more stories, more mysteries waiting patiently in the shadows." He turned to the assembled company with a slight smile. "Before I take my leave, allow me a final reflection." The room fell silent, each listener hanging on his every word. "Throughout this investigation," Poirot began, "we have seen the delicate balance of appearances and reality. The facades we construct, of respectability, affection, loyalty, often conceal the darker impulses that lie beneath." He gestured toward the now empty seats where Fenwick and Vaughan had been held. The culprits were not monsters from some distant realm, but individuals driven by fear, desperation, and desire. Their crimes were born not of malice alone, but of human frailty. Poirot's voice softened. Yet, it is precisely through understanding these frailties that justice can be tempered with mercy. The law must be firm, but the heart must also recognize the complexities that shape human behavior. He paused, looking around the room with thoughtful eyes. As for the Ashcombe chronometer itself, an object that has witnessed centuries, and now the final epoch of a chapter filled with sorrow, it remains a silent sentinel. Time moves ever onward, indifferent to human tragedy. A faint smile touched his lips. "I confess, I find a certain poetry in that. The chronometer reminds us that time reveals all, eventually. It teaches patience in the pursuit of truth, and humility in the face of life's mysteries." Lady Beatrice rose and approached Poirot, extending her hand. Monsieur Poirot, your insight and kindness have been a balm during these difficult days. You have our deepest gratitude." Poirot bowed slightly, taking her hand with warmth. "Madam, the pleasure and honour have been mine. It is always with great respect that I serve families such as yours, who carry history and legacy so profoundly." He turned to Miss Eloise with a gentle nod. "Mademoiselle Hartford, I wish you strength and courage as you embrace your true identity. The path ahead will not be easy, but truth is the foundation upon which you may build anew." Eloise's eyes shimmered with hope and resolve. As the afternoon waned, the household began to stir with quiet movement. Conversations resumed in softer tones. The servants prepared for evening, and the guests readied to depart, each carrying the weight of what had transpired and the promise of new beginnings. Poirot lingered by the window, gazing out at the estate's sprawling gardens, now bathed in golden light. His thoughts wandered to the intricate human stories he had witnessed, the fears, ambitions, and hidden corners of the soul. Each case was a reflection of life itself, complex and endlessly fascinating. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Jenkins entered quietly, holding a folder. "Monsieur Poirot, the documents you requested from the solicitor have arrived." Poirot nodded, accepting the papers. "Merci, Jenkins. These will be useful in ensuring the estate's affairs are settled justly." As Jenkins departed, Poirot folded the documents with deliberate care, a sense of completion settling within him. Before leaving Ashcombe Estate, Poirot made his customary rounds one last time, checking on Lady Beatrice, exchanging a few words with Miss Eloise, and offering quiet encouragement to Sir Reginald and Professor Langley. At the grand front door, the detective paused, taking in the stately facade one final time. The sun had broken fully through the clouds, casting warm light over the stone and ivy-covered walls. Poirot turned to Jenkins. "Tell the household that while this chapter closes, the stories of Ashcombe will live on in the hearts of those who cherish truth." As he stepped outside into the soft breeze, Poirot's thoughts turned forward, toward new mysteries, new puzzles to untangle with his little grey cells. But here, in this moment, he allowed himself a brief smile. Justice had been served. Peace, however fragile, had returned. The chronometer had marked its final epoch, and time, as always, moved inexorably onward. Chapter 19. Reflections and New Beginnings. The soft light of dawn broke gently over Ashcombe Estate, casting a warm glow on the dew-drenched gardens and the stately manor's stone facade. The once turbulent air was now calm, as if the estate itself breathed a sigh of relief after the recent storm of secrets and sorrow. The long days of suspicion, revelation, and heartbreak had given way to a fragile peace, one marked by healing, reflection, and tentative hope. Inside the grand drawing room, the atmosphere was softer, the tension replaced by quiet contemplation. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe sat near the hearth, a shawl draped lightly over her shoulders, her hands folded in her lap. The heavy burden of loss weighed upon her, but her eyes held a serene determination. Across from her, Miss Eloise Hartford sat composed, though her face bore the traces of recent tears. The truth of her birth had shattered illusions, but opened new doors to identity and belonging. Sir Reginald Claremont, whose arrogance had been tempered by the ordeal, appeared humbled. The ruin of his financial affairs and the moral failings exposed had forced a reckoning that he now faced with sombre resolve. Professor Archibald Langley, who had witnessed the unfolding drama from the edges, looked more thoughtful than ever, his usual detachment giving way to a human vulnerability rarely seen. Hercule Poirot sat comfortably in his favourite armchair, the little grey cells working not on a puzzle, but on the myriad complexities of human nature that this case had revealed. He lifted a delicate porcelain cup of tea to his lips, savouring the quiet after the storm. Lady Beatrice's voice broke the silence. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough for your wisdom and kindness. You have helped us find clarity in chaos, and brought justice where there was confusion." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "Madam, justice is not only the punishment of wrongs, but also the restoration of balance. The truth brings pain, but also the possibility of peace." Eloise reached out, her hand brushing lightly against Lady Beatrice's. "For so long I was a stranger in my own family. Now, though the path is uncertain, I feel I belong." Poirot smiled warmly. "Mademoiselle, identity is not given but chosen. You have the strength to define your own place. Reginald spoke quietly. I have much to atone for. My recklessness endangered those around me, but I vow to rebuild with honesty. Professor Langley added softly, Ashcombe's history is richer for its truths. May this be a lesson to us all. The servants moved quietly through the rooms, preparing the house for the day, the usual rhythms returning with gentle steadiness. The stolen chronometer, now recovered and safely returned to its velvet-lined case, gleamed silently, a symbol of time's impartial march and the endurance of legacy. Poirot took a slow walk through the estate's gardens, the fragrance of blooming flowers mingling with the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth. The ancient trees, their branches still heavy from the recent storm, stood resilient and majestic. Nature, Poirot mused to himself, has a way of renewing itself no matter the devastation. So must we, in our own way, renew and find strength after tragedy. As he walked, memories of the case flitted through his mind, the careful observations, the subtle tells, the frailties and passions that had led to murder and deceit. Each person involved had revealed facets of humanity: fear, love, envy, loyalty, desperation. Back in the drawing room, Poirot shared quiet conversations with Lady Beatrice, offering encouragement and hope. He spoke with Eloise about the challenges and possibilities that lay ahead. Reginald sought guidance on how to repair the damage done to his reputation and relationships, while Langley contemplated how to carry forward the lessons learned. The sun began to dip low, casting long shadows and painting the sky with shades of amber and rose. The estate's windows caught the light, sending flickers dancing across the polished floors. As evening fell, Poirot stood by the grand front door, gathering his belongings. The house was quiet now, the echoes of past events settling into memory. He glanced once more around the familiar halls, the ornate furnishings, the portraits of Ashcombe ancestors, the quiet dignity of a place that had weathered storms both literal and figurative. Jenkins appeared, ready to accompany him. "Will you return, Monsieur Poirot?" The detective smiled softly. "The path of justice calls me onward, Jenkins, but Ashcombe will remain in my thoughts." Stepping outside, the crisp evening air welcomed him. The stars began to twinkle faintly overhead, vast and eternal, a reminder of the endless mysteries that awaited. Poirot breathed deeply, the weight of the past lifting. The chronometer had marked its final epoch here, but life, like time, marched steadily onward. With a last glance back at the estate, Poirot turned and walked toward the horizon, his mind already sharpening on the puzzles yet to come, confident that whatever mysteries awaited, his little grey cells would be ready. Chapter 20. The Quiet Aftermath. The morning after the storm passed, Ashcombe Estate awoke to a gentle, forgiving light that filtered softly through the ancient oaks and blossoming hedges. Dew sparkled like diamonds on the emerald lawns, and the distant song of birds weaving through the fresh spring air gave a serene rhythm to the day. Though the house still bore the shadows of recent troubles, life inside was gradually settling back into its familiar measured pace. Inside the grand halls, footsteps echoed lightly on polished wooden floors as the household stirred from restless nights. Curtains were drawn aside to welcome the early sun, and the rich scents of fresh flowers mingled with the faint smoke of extinguished hearths. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe moved quietly through the corridors, the heavy cloak of grief still resting upon her shoulders, but tempered by a quiet determination. Her eyes, once clouded with sorrow, now shone with the resolve to rebuild, to heal the fractures that recent events had wrought upon the family and estate. The pain lingered, of course, it was inevitable, but beneath it lay a resilient spirit, strengthened by the truth's arrival and the justice that had been served. In the library she paused before the display case, where the Ashcombe chronometer rested once more. The delicate golden hands moved steadily against the pale clock face, marking time with indifferent precision. This heirloom, a silent witness to centuries of Ashcombe history, had survived tragedy and betrayal. Lady Beatrice placed a gentle hand upon the glass, her thoughts briefly drifting to the past, to the lives intertwined with this place, to the man who had given his life protecting its legacy. Elsewhere in the house, Miss Eloise Hertford sat by a sunlit window, a soft breeze playing with the edges of the lace curtains. The weight of her recently revealed lineage had transformed her world. No longer the distant cousin she once believed herself to be, she was now a daughter of Ashcombe, bound by blood and history. The truth, though painful, was liberating. Her thoughts wandered to the possibilities ahead, to building relationships once thought impossible, to carving out a future with honesty and pride. The scars of the past weeks were evident in her hesitant smile and the occasional quiet tears, but there was also a lightness in her step as she rose to join the household's morning preparations. The road ahead was uncertain, yet for the first time in many years she felt the stirrings of belonging.